I'm Jane.
And I'm Amanda.
Welcome
Welcome
to
to
Come
Come
Dowse
Dowse
with
with
Me.
me.
Question time.
It's a question. We've got a question from a subscriber. Hooray. Well, normally we answer these in the comments, but this one in particular from Old Homestead 1950 was, can I dowse for the health of another person? And we just felt, Jen and I were having a chat about this, and we just felt that this needed a bit more than a yes or no, because there's a bit more involved with that question. So where shall we start? So I think if you're wanting to dowse for the health of another person, the short answer is, well, right. The short answer is yes, and the short answer is no. Whether you should do it or shouldn't do it is another question as
I
well.
think it comes down to ethics at the end of the day. It's an ethical question, and they are always really more challenging to answer because, yeah,
So it depends so we're going to go through a couple of scenarios, I think, because we don't know what this person, we don't know if Old Homestead is a practitioner or a friend or if you talk about a client or a family member or a friend. But whoever that is, I think you still need to have a verbal conversation with that person and say, it might be, would you like me to dowse through to see what we can find? Or but for somebody just to dowse without the verbal permission of another person, you can get permission, and you might dowse and say, can I have permission to ask this question? And you might get a yes, but then it depends what questions you're asking. So if that health of another person is a concern and you're trying to diagnose, I wouldn't say that's a good idea. Not a good idea to try and dowse and diagnose. That's not and you might have a list of things, but that's not a good idea.
I was going to say, Amanda, for me, it's like, is that your role in that to do that? I think it comes down to lots of things, but mainly, is that your role? I mean, is our role to diagnose?
No.
When you go to a doctor, you consult someone that's a medical practitioner that does that. So it's kind of, yeah. If you want to
And
know something yourself for
yeah.
yourself, then that's okay because that's kind of like intuition. But when you start going into the realms of other people, yeah, I think there's, and professional dowsers are professional dowsers that deal with health themselves, and they have a particular way of working. So, and I don't profess to be a medical dowser. So,
And I think what you said earlier as well, when we were chatting before we started recording, was that if you go to the doctors, you wouldn't say, oh, can I just have a look at Ivy's records and see what's going on? Because there's a privacy, a privacy. So I know as a dowser, when I've got a client that comes to me, if a client comes to me about emotions and things, I'm not going to doubt. They might come to me and say, I've got a really stiff shoulder, or I've got a problem with my hip, and then I would consult my sort of information about what hips, which emotions are linked to hips, and then go through the emotions. And I would dowse, but I would find out what the emotion is, but then I would still say to the client, do you feel safe to release this? So um, you it's still up to that person to release that if they choose to. Likewise, if I get an email client who has emailed me and said, I've got this and this and this going on, can you send me a list of emotions to dowse through or to clear myself? Then I will dowse down the list and I'll find what comes up and email it to them. But again, it's their choice at their end whether they do that. I'm not going to, it's not something I would do for them. But there's a couple of questions that you might like, Old Homestead 1950, you might like to try instead if you do want to help a friend or family member, is that you could say, does my friend or family, whoever it is that you're talking, does this person need help at the moment? And then it might be, should you encourage them to see a doctor? Or it might be, is there anything I can do to help my friend right now? And that might be just asking them out for a cup of tea. That might, you can dowse through, do they need some company? Do they need to be left alone? It might just be they need space and time alone to deal with it, to deal with what they've got going on. You might also like to ask, yeah, what can I do right now? Is there anything right now I can do? And if you get a no, say, all right, is there anything I can do in a week? Will there anything be, or you could just keep checking in. Is there any, each day, is there anything I can do today? and you send in good intentions and good wishes and things, but if there's anything else that you can do, and if there is something you can do, again, it's just finding your way through that maze of questions. Is it something, is it time, is it something that they need physically, that they need, is it that they're struggling? It might be that they're coming across as ill and worried, but they're worried about money, or they're worried about something else. So it's sort of finding out how you can help that person without necessarily, I mean, they might not know themselves and not realize that there's something, you might have spotted something that they haven't seen themselves. So again, you don't want to sort of alert somebody to something that might not actually happen as well. And there's all sorts of things, people's energy levels. Are they drinking enough water? Are they getting enough sleep? Is something worrying them? And all those different questions that you can dowse. But yeah, for the health of another person, if you're trying to pinpoint a particular issue, then I don't think that's probably a good idea. Other people might disagree, and other people might do this. But for us personally, for both Jen and I, it's, we would say, don't try and pinpoint a health issue, but you can pinpoint how you can help that person. Does that make sense?
I think so, and it's about your own personal well-being as well, looking after your own well-being, because actually you might, if you're quite empathic or sensitive, you can pick up on other people's stuff, and it's not yours, and then you end up having to clear that as well as trying to support them. And also, it kind of comes into the realms a little bit with energy healing as well. And certainly, you can identify where something, maybe there's a bit of disharmony in the body, but at the end of the day, it's about working with that and how that person wants to work. They might not want to, be dowsed, or it's that thing. And then it's like, when you've dowsed it, then what do you do with that information as well? So it can, I think, if someone's unwell, then to seek appropriate medical attention, I think, is the thing that I'd go with.
I mean, some people do dowse for the higher self, don't they? So they dowse for their own higher self, or they dowse for the higher self with somebody else, and think, okay, they're struggling, I'm going to dowse for the higher self. But even then, the higher self might be going, yeah, you've got my permission, but the human form on earth, depending on what your belief system is, of course, but this is an option. Your higher self, a person's higher self is going, yes, help me. But the human body and the human person has got so much to deal with it. If you were to change or try and suggest any changes to that and make changes, then the human person might get so exhausted that they can't actually function, because you've done changes that they are not aware of, and that's just made their human life even more difficult. So I think a person will get to do those things when they're ready at their time, without any sort of change. And people will change that themselves when the time is right. And I think it's, you wouldn't want anybody, I know I wouldn't want anybody dowsing for me without my permission verbally, to say, okay, well, I'm just gonna give this a tweak, and I'm just gonna give that a boost, and I'm just gonna do this. It's like, don't mess with my system. My system is mine, it's protected.
And it's interesting you say that, because I have been out with groups of dowsers, and someone has, without my permission, dowsed something, and it's made me really aggy, because it's like, hang on a minute, I haven't given you permission to do that.
It
And
feels quite intrusive,
it's
doesn't
quite
it?
intrusive, and the information that they're coming out with is not necessarily beneficial to me, and so that's really, it can be unhelpful. It can
At
be
that time,
unhelpful, and
yeah.
then it can become across as they're trying to give advice, and it might not be meant that way, and it might be well-meaning, but it's just how myself I've reacted rather than responded to it. So I think,
Yeah.
it's knowing that the person that you're doing, I think it just opens up a whole kind of plethora of
It's a big subject,
exploration.
isn't it? It's a great question. So
Yeah,
thank you. It's a
yeah.
brilliant question. So thank you for putting that one down. It's definitely given us a lot of food for thought. And if anybody else has any comments, pop them in, or any questions as well, and we can do this question time.
And just to say, even though if you don't agree with maybe our views on it, that's okay. I mean, I think it's up to the individual, and
Yeah,
it's an individual choice and what feels right within you.
excellent. Well, I hope that's answered the question. Old Home said 1950. Thank you again, and we'll see you again. Come Dowse with me episode series 5 coming up soon.
Yeah.
Exciting. Thank you again for the question, and we'll see you soon.
Happy dowsing.
Happy dowsing.